على محبة الحسن والحسين أعيدها ثانيا. اللهم صل على محمد على محبة الزهراء الثالث بأعلى أصواتكم.
اللهم صل على محمد. أحسنتم. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة وعلى أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يهدي به الله من اتبع رضوانه سبل السلام ويخرجهم من الظلمات إلى النور بإذنه ويهديهم إلى صراط مستقيم. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides through him. This is what the verse says. Through him whosoever follows his pleasure, the paths of peace, and extracts them from darkness to light through his permission and guides them to the right path. Yahdi bihi is in reference to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Ahlul Bayt. That Allah guides through the Holy Prophet, through the Ahlul Bayt. And in fact, Amir al-Mu'mineen uses this verse in the introduction of his son, Al-Imam Al-Hassan salawatullahi alayhi, saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides through him the paths of peace and he extracts people from the darkness of ignorance into the light of knowledge and salvation and guides them to the straight path. Before we begin this discussion on this evening where we commemorate the martyrdom of Imam Al-Hassan Al-Mujtaba salawatullahi alayhi, the lives of the Imams are very long and intricate. And rather than speak about the same vital statistics every time, we take elements of within their lives and speak about those elements to gain a greater understanding and to attain some sort of benefit from it. So when we look at the life of the Imam salawatullahi alayhi, one of the biggest things that stands out is the forbearance of the Imam and the peace treaty that the Imam had with Muawiyah alayhi la'natullah. The peace treaty that was made between them is something that's very important for us to understand. But before we even talk about this peace treaty and how we can benefit from understanding about the peace treaty with Imam Al-Hassan, firstly, we need to understand some definitions. One of them is the definition of the word cost. Everything in this life has a cost. What does cost mean? By definition, cost is a price that you have to pay. Whatever it is you do in life, it has a cost. Probably the most expensive cost and the easiest cost to spend is time. You have to spend some time on whatever it is that you want. Whatever action you do, like throwing a sliver of steel or a pin of iron into the ocean, it will raise the level of the ocean by that much. Even though it's minuscule and it's negligible and you probably can't measure it, but this is what happens. Whatever it is that you do in life has a cost. He says, the Imam says, وَلَا تَنْفُقْ إِلَّا بِقَدَرْ مَا تَسْتَفِيد. Imam Al-Mujtaba says, do not pay. لا تنفق إلا بقدر ما تستفيد. Do not spend except with the amount that you will benefit. So he's saying basically you have to do what they call in business a cost-benefit analysis before you spend anything. That I'm going to spend money, why do I have to be careful with it? Because you worked hard to get that money. Especially to get money that is halal, you work hard to get that money. And the hadith says that your wealth is the status of your blood, Islamically. مال المؤمن بحرمة دمه. The wealth of a believer has the status of his blood. Now, when you go to spend time, or you go to spend your money, or you go to spend anything that you have to look at what is the cost that I am paying and what is the benefit that I am getting back. This is important. And this is something we notice in the lives of the Imams. The Imams, salamullahi alayhim, he says that Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He bought from the believers their lives and their wealth بِأَنَّ لَهُمُ الْجَنَّةِ, that they have paradise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that your value, or you've been sold for paradise. This is what you're going to receive. What's the cost? The cost is your life. Is everything that you do within your life. If it's for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you have achieved this. But if it's for anything other than that, then you have gained nothing. And we see the people in history that sold everything and they got nothing. One of them that we'll speak about tonight is Al-Ja'da bint al-Ash'ath. Ja'da was the wife of Imam Al-Hassan. And she sold out her whole life, everything that she had, for what? For a fake promise, a false promise. When she had before her, she could have attained paradise. This is a very important concept that we need to look at within all of our lives. I sit at school, for example, in the classroom, and I want to be a class clown. And it's funny, and these people are going to laugh at me, and they're going to laugh with me, but at the end, we all finish school and we all get out of school, and what did I get out of it? Did I improve my education? Is my literacy better? Do I know how to speak and read and understand better? No, this is a problem. Then for that period, the cost that you paid was far too high for a few laughs. You could have got laughs doing something else. You could have read 1,001 jokes. Rather than sit there and cause this. You don't get the benefit out of it. And this cost that you pay remains with you for the rest of your life. Very hard to play catch up in life. But you can try. And you can work hard. That's just one example. Many other examples of people that don't analyze the cost of their time, the cost of themselves, the cost of their wealth. Whereas the Imams, salamullahi alayhim, they taught us, as the Imam says, do not spend except to the degree that you will gain benefit from. So if, for example, this thing that I want to buy, this jacket is going to keep me warm, I shouldn't pay 10 times as much because it's going to have, for example, a certain brand on it. Or these shoes are going to help me walk, and they're good high quality walking shoes. I don't have to go and get the $10,000 version of them because they've been promoted by some celebrity, singer or puppet. It's not going to give me any extra benefit. And the thing is, I work hard for that extra money. That's what I do, and I spend my time in that extra money. For example, in the same way with your religion, this is what you have to look at. That the cost that I'm paying is my life. Regardless, I'm going to die. And this world is going to go past, right? So, what am I buying with this? This is what the Imams teach us. And that's why sometimes we look and we say, well, what was this action of the Imam? And historians and political analysts, they go back and they look. So why did Imam Al-Hassan make a treaty? And why did Imam Al-Hussein go to war, for example? This is the way that they look at it. Imam Al-Hussein went to war. Imam Al-Hassan made a peace treaty. Why didn't Imam Al-Hassan also go to war? And look what Muawiyah inherited, left behind for the whole Islamic Ummah. We'll speak about this. That's one. Two. The other thing we need to understand is rationalizing. That the concept of rationalizing, I think it's in Arabic it's called aqlana. So it's from the word aql, but it's trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. Rationalizing or rationalization, they use it sometimes as a psychological term, that when you do something wrong and you just make up a justification for it. Okay? So for example, if somebody was to get caught in an extramarital affair, and they'll say to their wife, yes, sure, I was speaking to that woman, but I don't love her, I love you, for example. Okay? And so this is meant to make up for everything. They rationalize what this is. They try and make some sense of it when there is no logic behind what it is that they are saying. Or for example, when we look at the way that they rationalize the justification of a war. Around the world, we're plagued by so many different wars. And they try and rationalize this by saying the reason we're going to war is if we don't go to war, we can't live the lives that we're living, for example. And so you say, yeah, okay, this makes sense. So we go into the longest ever war that the United States has ever been with outside of their soil in Afghanistan. For over 20 years. From that war alone, Do you know how many people were killed in that war? This is just through military violence. 197,000 people were killed by military violence, and by bomb or bullet. That's not counting the people that died from getting sick. That's not counting the people that died from their poverty. That's not counting the people that died that got kicked out of their homes. And what did they achieve? What did we achieve? What was achieved? But they rationalize it by saying, we did this for your protection, in your name. We're doing this in your name. Do you understand the concept of rationalization? This is the concept of rationalization. That we do something and then I give it some sort of reasoning behind it. For example, in certain countries, like the United States, when people come as refugees from across the border, just like here in Australia, people come by boat as refugees and they put them into refugee camps. In the United States, they separate the children from the parents, okay? And they put the parents in a separate prison and they put the children in a separate prison where they get looked after, okay? So they put these people in cages. Then people come up and say, well, how can you separate these children? Like, isn't this against every law? They say, yes, no, we can do it because they've committed a crime by entering the country illegally. And if someone commits a certain crime, like a violent crime, well, we take their children away from them because we need to protect their children. This is the same pretense that we're doing. Notice how they're using some sort of logical reasoning, but it's not logical at all. These people are running away from poverty or war or something, and they've entered your country. The last thing they need to be is separated. And the children don't understand where they're gone or why they're there or for how long they're going to be there, nor do the parents. And it takes years of processing before something happens. But they rationalize it in this way. I'll give you one more example of rationalization, inshallah, and then we'll move on. In the Ottoman Empire, you know how many people love watching these, what are those Turkish historical, Ortugul. People love watching Ortugul, for example. Ortugul is like very well made show, very well designed show from the clips that I've seen. But the whole purpose of it, there's a message inside there. They're trying to sort of whitewash and revise the history of the Ottoman Empire. To show that the Ottomans, you know, we were doing it for faith and we were doing it for haqq and whatever it was. And we had our Khalif. But if you look into the actual history of the Ottoman Empire, what they used to do is they used to act in a way where the ends justify the means. Which means they look at whatever it is that I do, as long as I can justify it in some way, then it's okay. And even in the modern day, it's got to the point like it's so blatant in terms of propaganda that they just give you false information, then later they lie about it. Like recently they were saying that the president of Ukraine, he was lying the whole time. And he said, yeah, I was lying, but I was doing it for the defense of my country. They said, oh, fantastic. As long as it was for the defense of your country, that's fine. And this is the same thing. They lie about certain things and they rationalize it by saying that we were defending you. So in the Ottoman Empire, the Khalif Murad III, he had 25 sons. One of his sons, after he wasn't even dead, he was still alive, but he was dying. So his son Muhammad III, or Mehmed III, or call him Mehmed III, so we don't have to say salawat every time we hear it. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. What he did is he said, look, I've got all of these brothers. What am I going to do with them? If they find a moment, they might fight me and take the leadership off me. So he went to the Islamic scholars and said, look, I need to kill these guys, but I need to make it look proper. Has to be legitimate. How do we make it look legitimate? So he says to him, the way to make it look true and correct is, let's look into the scripture and the Quran. So they look into the Quran, and the verse in the Holy Quran says, Al-fitnatu ashaddu min al-qatl. That fitna, which is basically dissent and corruption amongst the people, is worse than murder. So he said, well, my brothers being alive is fitna. And this is worse than murder, so if I kill them, this is legitimate. So he got one of the khulafa, one of the hukam, one of the judges, the qudat of Islam, to sign off on it. And he began to kill his brothers. It says 3 of his brothers he strangled with his own hands. Like, I can understand the killing, sort of, right? But then strangling with your own hands, this is like very personal. And there were 7 women, 7 concubines, that were pregnant from his father. He drowned them. He drowned all 7 of them while they were pregnant. So he killed them and he killed whatever they were bearing. And through this he said, I have stopped the fitna. This is it. and since I'm the Khalif of Allah, this is the correct thing to do. Do you understand rationalization? This is what rationalization is about. So these two things we need to understand to comprehend the story of the Imam, Salamullahi alayhi. Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, he says, بَلِيَّةُ النَّاسِ عَلَيْنَا عَظِيمًا إن دعوناهم لم يجيبونا وإن تركناهم لم يهتدوا بغيرنا. He says that the trial and the tribulation of the people upon us is huge. If we call unto them, they don't listen to us. Imam al-Baqir says, saying this about Ahlul Bayt. And if we leave them, they won't be guided by other than us. So it's difficult. What do you do with these people when you tell them what is true and correct and they just follow something else? For example, we hear about the first Khalif, and when he took power, there was the Ridda Wars. And the Ridda Wars were against people that were turning against Islam. So when he took power, him and his mercenaries, these paid soldiers, they started fighting anyone that wouldn't pay zakat. And people look at this and say, oh, look what a great thing he did. He went to war to make sure the people pay zakat. Well, the Prophet never did this, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Nor did any of the Imams after this. Imam Ali alayhi salam never forced anyone to do a tax return. He never went into someone's farm and said, oh, this is what you should be paying. He told them, you know what you need to pay? This is it, you pay it. There was no taxmen, there was no tax collectors in the reign of Imam Ali alayhi salam. These people were doing it out of love of faith, but the first Khalif, he went to war. So rather than us look at that and say, oh, what a good thing he did, why don't we question and ask, why was he doing that? Why were they not paying? Did they have a reason? Why did Malik bin Nueda not pay his tax? Was there a reason? Yes. Because he saw the person in the position of Khalif as not the rightful Khalif. So he said, I'm not paying this guy. I'm paying the guy whom Rasulullah appointed. And when this was his idea, they went to war with him and they killed him amongst many other people. And these were known as the Ridda Wars. And so the Imam salawatullahi alayhi, he begins in an era. Imam Hassan al-Mushtaba salawatullahi alayhi was, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. 4 to 5 years after Hijrah, he was born. And then, after his birth, Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi alayhi took him to the Prophet named him Hassan. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This name literally means good. That's what it means, good. And then Rasulullah began to speak about him and his brother. He says, him and his brother, Imaman, Qama or Qa'ada. That these are both Imams. These are both Imams, whether they stand up or whether they sit down. Whether they rise or they do not. And he would say about both of them, that Ya Allah, he would say to the people, that Allah loves them. Or he would say, oh Allah, love them and love whosoever loves them. Or love whoever loves the one who loves them, for example. He would say about Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein, Sayyida Shababi Ahl al-Jannah. These are the two masters of the youth of paradise. This is the status that they have. Hasn't been said about anyone else. So when Imam Al-Hassan salawatullahi alayhi took his position as the Khalif, he is one of two people in the whole history of Islam that everybody pled allegiance to them. Everyone gave the bay'ah. Who are these two people? Number one is Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Imam Ali alayhi salam, after Uthman was killed, and he was killed within his own house, the people saw that there was too much corruption going around. What do we do? The only person that can save us is Al-Hassan. So they went to the house of Imam Ali alayhi salam, the narration says, until they almost crushed Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein under their feet. They all ran and they grabbed Imam Ali. Imam Ali says, I don't want anything to do with this. They took him out and they said, you are going to be the Khalif. All the Muslims, with the exception of Bilad al-Sham, but in the Hijaz, the Arabian Peninsula, in Iraq, they all gave their bay'ah to Amir al-Mu'mineen sallallahu alayhi. The second person in the history of all of Islam is Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam. Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam, after the martyrdom of Imam Ali alayhi salam, one of his companions went to the holy mosque, Masjid al-Haram, where the Kaaba is, and he took allegiance for Imam Al-Hassan, and all the people said, we plead our allegiance to you, O son of Rasulullah. Don't forget, Imam Al-Hassan was somebody who looked like Rasulullah. His walk was like Rasulullah. his vision, the way that he spoke and his khuluq was like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They would see him and they would see the Holy Prophet within him. They pled their allegiance. They gave their bay'ah to the Imam, and then this companion went to Medina and he took the bay'ah for Imam Al-Hassan, and then within the Kufa, they all gave their bay'ah. They said, we are with you all the way. So they all had pled their allegiance to him. Imam Al-Hassan salawatullah alayhi was known for his generosity, and the people would come to ask of him whatever it is that they needed and whatever it is that they wanted, but he was never somebody that was chasing after this world. In fact, the hadith says that he halved his wealth with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on 3 occasions. Fully halved all his wealth. Imagine just going to your bank accounts now and everything and fully halving, saying that's for Allah and the rest is for me. Imam Al-Hassan did that 3 times. And on 2 occasions, he gave all of his wealth until he had nothing left. 2 occasions. So he wasn't somebody that was following this world. And we know this because when we look at the source of it and we see the source of being it, he is a divinely appointed Imam, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is appointed Imam Al-Hassan salawatullah alayhi as the Imam. So if Allah selected him and he said this is the person who belongs in this position, then every decision he makes and whatever he does is the correct and rightful decision. The Imam salawatullah alayhi, after he was appointed as the Khalif, obviously Muawiyah, who was in the Sham, who was in the greater area of Syria, refused to accept this. He said, no, now this is an opportunity, because already historically he had been fighting with Imam Ali alayhi salam in the Battle of Siffin and so forth. There was other small battles that were funded by Muawiyah, like Nahrawan, and the battle with the Khawarij, the people that they were like the literalists, the extremists, that would not believe in imamah at all. They used to say that al-hukmu lillah, that Allah should be the one. It's like today you have these Quranists and these literalists where they just say basically that no, we don't need people, we talk directly to Allah and we have the Quran, we don't need anyone to tell us what the meaning of the Quran is. So basically what he's saying is he's the Imam. That's what he's saying, but not in those words. Do you get it? Because if he tells you that forget about the Imam, forget about the prophets, well, let's just look at the Quran and see what we can make of it. Well, he's the guy that came up with the idea, so he's going to be the head of it, so he basically wants the position of the Imam. So these literalists that were around there that fought the Imam, Muawiyah decided that I will pay whoever I can get, build up an army, and we're going to war with Al-Hassan. Why? I want to be the supreme commander of all of the Arab lands, of the Hijaz, of the Kufa. I want leadership over everything. Now Muawiyah, without going through a deep history of Muawiyah, but Muawiyah is somebody, the son of Abu Sufyan, someone that fought against Islam his whole life. In fact, he never entered Islam until the conquest of Mecca. So it wasn't until the Prophet ﷺ had built a big enough army and gone into Mecca that the father of Muawiyah, Abu Sufyan, and the clan of Abu Sufyan, Banu Umayyah, they entered Islam. Why? Just for safety. They said that that's it, they've taken over. If we remain kuffar, we will be othered, we will be ousted from the main community. So they just accepted Islam. They were the ones whom the Prophet, they were basically owned by the Prophet. He had them as a ransom. And then he called them at-tulaqqa. He said, you are freed. You are now free. So they were known, these people, obviously, and if they enter the realm of Islam, they're Muslims, but it's not the same. Of course it's not the same as the person, for example, who fought and protected the Holy Prophet, who fought by the side of the Holy Prophet and protected the Holy Prophet. It's not the same as the person who enters in earlier on. Isn't that true? You look at any organization today, this is the same thing. The people that were with it when it was just a fledgling, when it was just small and it was still growing, these are the people that achieved the highest ranks within it. Why? Because they really sacrificed when it was difficult. Why did the Prophet, for example, love Sayyidah Khadija more than all of his wives? Because he says that Sayyidah Khadija believed in me when everyone else belied me. Everyone said, you're lying. But Sayyidah Khadija, salamullahi alayha, she believed in the Holy Prophet. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave her this status. So ultimately, Imam Al-Hassan, salamullahi alayhi, he built up a massive army. When he got this army together and he gave them a lecture to go to war, none of them stood up except for his main, he had his main Shia, who were the companions of Imam Ali alayhi salam. These and some of them were people that we hear about later in Karbala. We hear about Habib ibn Mudahir, for example. You hear about Malik al-Ashtar, the son of Malik al-Ashtar. You hear about Al-Miqdad. You hear about all of these great companions, and some of them that were companions of Rasulullah, Al-Hujr ibn Adi. These big companions, Burayr, for example, Al-Hamdani, that were companions of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, they were companions of Imam al-Hassan. So these warriors were very close to Imam al-Hassan. But some of the others that were part of the army were like Shimr ibn al-Jawshan. He was part of the army. He gave his allegiance to Imam al-Hassan. Not because he believed in Imam al-Hassan, but he just said, if we're going to go to war, war means money. Because if we go to war and we defeat the enemy, we get to take the booty. So we get armor, we get swords, we get whatever they leave behind, we're able to take it. So a lot of people will join because of that. They never believed in the cause. Just like today, in the world today, many soldiers sign up to soldiery. Why? Because we see, the ads that they put on, for example, come in and you get tax-free money and there's all these benefits that you get and it's cool. You get to drive a tank all day, so you think you're going to play Call of Duty. And then it turns out very different when you end up in the battlefield, if you end up. But in the US, for example, they told them that, you have subsidized education. You won't have to pay for your university. We'll pay for your university. Things like that. And just in general, it's cool. You get to shoot a gun and whatever it is. But not many people go there believing in the ideology that they signed up for, or whatever it is that they're going to do. So these people were in the army of Imam al-Hassan, Salam alayhi. And then Muawiyah had come with his great army. So what had happened is the Imam sent the army to a place called Mada'in and Maskin. Mada'in was a city which basically bordered, that was the first major city that was that bordered the Levantine. So below the Sham, that's the first place that they would confront if they were going to come to Iraq. So Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam was in Mada'in with a big army, and then outside of Mada'in there was a city called Maskin. In that city, in Maskin, this is where they had the other big army, which was under the rulership of a guy called Ubaydullah ibn Abbas. To cut a long story short, Muawiyah was sending his spies because he had his right-hand man, Amr ibn al-As. Amr ibn al-As was known as a very conniving personality. Amr ibn al-As is the guy that was famous for his strategy when he told Muawiyah in the Battle of Siffin. He said to him, he said to Muawiyah, you go down and fight Imam Ali alayhi salam, and the winner of that will decide the winner of the whole thing. And that's it, we don't have to all fight. Leader should fight the leader. You know how sometimes you hear people come up with the idea, why should the whole country go to war? Get this leader to fight that leader, and whoever wins is the winner. So Muawiyah understood, like you're going to challenge Imam Ali alayhi salam. That's it, you're finished. So Muawiyah said, this is a great idea, but rather than me going, he says to Amr, you go. So Amr goes, and as you know the story, when Amr went down to fight Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he got close enough, he ripped off his clothes. So he's fully naked, so Imam Ali had to look away and then he ran. They say that, some of the historians say, we don't know how he managed to do that. Like, how was he able to take off his armor and his helmet and everything? So they think it must have been some strategy that he was probably half dressed on his way down anyway. And then, because this is the strategy that he had, that was the only way that he could escape the sword of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Because, Muhammad. And so we see that with the Imam and Amr ibn al-As was advising, Muawiyah, and then Muawiyah started telling some of the people, like he told Ubaydullah ibn Abbas, I'll give you 1 million dirhams. 500,000 now and 500,000 when we enter the Kufa together and take over. So Ubaydullah ibn Abbas went over to Muawiyah. Well, this was what the historians say. And Ubaydullah ibn Abbas was the cousin of Imam al-Hassan. This is the thing. So it was a huge betrayal. But this didn't matter. One of the most important points that we need to look at, that even though a lot of the army did betray, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam still had a strong enough army that Muawiyah was too afraid to face them. So they say that, for example, the army that the Imam built up was over 30,000 soldiers. Over 30,000. But I think the Imam, if he only had maybe 3,000 soldiers, he would have been able to defeat Muawiyah. Even though Muawiyah's army was 100,000. Why? Other than the verses in the Holy Quran that say this, that speak about if you have believers, obviously you can fight 10 times as many or even 100 times as many, depending on the faith of the believers. But the Imam had that ability to do that because he knew he had real warriors with him. Of them were Imam Al-Hassan himself. Imam Al-Hussein, Imam Al-Hassan is the hero of the Battle of Jamal. These are the sons of Imam Ali alayhi salam. That they were known in battle everywhere. There was nowhere that you knew that these people were on the battlefield. Abu al-Fadl Abbas, for example, was amongst them. And more, the brothers of Abu al-Fadl, all the ones that were sons of Amir al-Mu'mineen, these were thoroughbred warriors. The proof of this, the biggest proof of Imam al-Hassan, even with all the betrayal, still having military strength, is the fact that Muawiyah asked for a peace treaty. Because if Muawiyah thought he could defeat them, do you think he would ask for negotiations or a peace treaty? Never. If you have the ability to defeat another army, there's no reason. You walk in and you take everything and more. So the Imam realized that I should see what the people, what do they want to do? Do they want to go to war? Do they want to fight? Or do they not? By this time, Muawiyah had sent a delegation into Madain. They came to Imam Al-Hassan. They said, look, these are letters from your generals that say the second they get a chance, they'll kill you or they'll sell you over to Muawiyah for whatever cost. So when Imam Al-Hassan saw this, people began to talk. So the media at the time, the people were just talking and saying, look, we saw a delegation come. It looks like Muawiyah is going to sign a treaty with Imam Al-Hassan. So all those people that were looking for some sort of favor started running over to Muawiyah and said, look, we were with the Umayyads all along. The likes of Shimr ibn al-Jawshan, the likes of Muslim ibn Aqaba, these people, they were like, Al-Husayn ibn Numayr, people like that, they left and they started going over to Muawiyah and saying, look, we'll be on your side. Whatever it is, because they were scared that they might not get a position. So the Imam came out and he said to them that we have a situation here which there will be no honor within it, nor will Muawiyah be fair with this. But if you want to live, then let me sign the agreement with Muawiyah. He says, but if you want to die and you want to bring the rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we will unsheath our swords on Muawiyah until we destroy his army. We destroy his army and we'll bring him to the rule of Allah. Which one do you want? They said to him, what? Al-Baqiyya, Al-Baqiyya. We want to remain, we want to remain, we want to live. Sign the sulh, sign the sulh. Muawiyah gave the Imam, Salamullahi alayhi, he gave him a treaty, a blank paper, they say. In some narrations, historians say they sent him a blank paper that was signed. Muawiyah said, right, whatever you want, as long as I remain in power. So Imam Al-Hassan, Salamullahi alayhi, saw that these people weren't going to fight. The ones that he had with him, they would have got martyred. The problem is, if they get martyred, imagine this is even without them getting martyred. Think of the state that it was back then. And last week we mentioned some of these things. That people would rather say they didn't know who their father was, or they would rather say they are a kafir than say they are a lover of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Can you believe that? This is how bad it was. That if people mentioned that they were lovers of Imam Ali alayhi salam, they would be killed, they would be slaughtered. Because the situation was that grave, and Muawiyah was killing whoever he wanted under that pretext, they would always just test them. Oh, what do you think of the first Khalif and the second Khalif? If they don't like their response, they would just kill them. So Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam had to find a way to fix this. Muawiyah didn't care, as long as he had his position of power. So Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam, he gave him various conditions. Of the conditions that he gave him, firstly he said that Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam is free, Imam Al-Hussein, is free from this treaty. This treaty is just between us. He says, through this treaty, number one, you are not allowed to be referred to as Amir al-Mu'mineen. Number two, these are of them, not in this exact number. That you are not allowed to persecute anybody that's a follower of Imam Ali alayhi salam or a lover of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Number three, if you die, you're not allowed to appoint a Khalif after you. That if you die, it comes back to me in some narrations. In other narrations, it says to the Muslims. But the point is, he says to him, you are not allowed to appoint anyone after this. Number four, your witness, you're not allowed to give any testimony. Your testimony should not be accepted. Among these things, and number five, he said to him that Imam Ali alayhi salam is not allowed to be cursed on the pulpits and in the majalis. Muawiyah said, whatever you want. He signed the treaty, and as soon as he had signed the treaty and accepted the treaty, he took the treaty. In a narration it says that he stopped them to pray Salat al-Jama'a at 10 o'clock in the morning, Salat al-Dhuhr. It was 10 a.m. It wasn't even Dhuhr. He said, all right, to the Mu'adhin, he got up and he said, this is it, because he didn't care. And then he told them, know this, O people, Muawiyah. He said to them, know that I did not fight you so you can pray and fast and pay zakat, because you do this already. I just fought you so I could be your commander. That's it. I just want power over you. They accepted this. Why? Because Muawiyah would pay off the top guys. Just like you see most governments, the way they work today, it's a very similar way. That you pay off the top generals and you make sure that they all have good positions and good jobs. You look at these politicians, no matter what they do, subhanAllah, like they literally, like in the case of Christian Porter, they literally rape people. They rape people, and then when he gets to court, magically $1 million appears in his account for his defense. Just magically. How does that happen? Or somebody gets kicked out of some political position, the next minute, like in the case of Barilaro, gets a top job in New York City. Out of nowhere, just all of a sudden he's on a 6-figure job, 6-figure salary, even though he just got kicked out of government, for example. It's similar. This is similar to this corruption, and you see it all over the world. Muawiyah was just like this, paying off the people, giving them positions of power in order for him to remain in power and to maintain his power. Slowly, he started destroying the treaty bit by bit. So the Imam gave him this ability to hold on to that we have some sort of treaty, to show the people why. Have a look at us. This is any of the biggest reasons that we have. And before we get into one last discussion, if I have time. In this day and age, you have people looking at history and saying, well, look, all the ashab were friends. You look at the history, the first Khalif, the second Khalif, they used to get Imam Ali all the time to come and give them advice, things like that. They were all happy. Why do you Shia say that the house of Fatima al-Zahra was attacked? Because this is what happens. History, it's there. But they begin to cover it up in different ways. They begin to cover it up, and you can't see what it is that clearly, because the media hides and censors the true facts. The media at the time, this is what it was doing. At the time, as we know, there was a moratorium on hadith. It was forbidden for anybody to narrate a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. During the reign of the first Khalif, during the reign of the second Khalif. But even then, historically, we still have the sources that tell us these things happened. Imam Ali alayhi salam was not given his position. We have narrations, Imam Ali was tied up, was forced out of his house, was taken and forced to give bay'ah to the first Khalif. And again, they tell you all these things, but they're dubious, we're unsure of what they were like historically. But Imam Al-Hassan, through this treaty, it became crystal clear. Showed exactly what Muawiyah was. Muawiyah had no interest in Islam, nothing to do with Islam. He began with rationalizing, but then after he didn't even bother rationalizing. Why? He had bought the souls of the people. There was no point in anymore giving any reason for the things that he did or why he did what he did. Why he appointed, for example, Yazid. There was no more reasoning behind it. And if you notice at the time of Imam Al-Hassan salawatullah alayhi, condition after condition was getting broken until the final condition, which was when Muawiyah dies, he can't appoint Yazid, he appointed Yazid. So all the conditions of the treaty of Imam Al-Hassan were broken. Now, brings us to the final question. Why did Imam Al-Hassan choose a treaty and he didn't choose to go to war like Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam? Number one, we need to look at the importance of, or understand, the definition of the word shahada, of someone being a shaheed, a martyr. What does it mean for somebody to be a shaheed? The hadith عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله, which is صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. And this is a hadith that's narrated mainly from Sunni sources, mind you. This is not found in many Shia sources, but the matan of the hadith is correct. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it's narrated that he said, إن أكثر شهداء أمتي على الفراش وربما قتيلا بين الصفين الله أعلم بنيته. He says that the majority of the shuhada of my ummah will be on their beds. They will die on their beds. And perhaps somebody that dies between two ranks, Allah knows best what his Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best what his intention was. This is one. Two, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, Mal mujahid al-shaheed fi sabilillah bi'a'zam ajran mimman qadara fa'af walakad al-afif an yakuna malakan min al-malaika. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, the one who fights, a mujahid, al-shaheed fi sabilillah, the one that fights in the path of Allah and he dies a martyr, does not have a greater award mimma qadara wa af. Yani the one who has the ability, but he pushes away from that ability. He says, وَلَكَادَ الْعَفِيفْ يَكُونُ مَلَكًا مِنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. He says, and perhaps the one who holds himself back is like perhaps an angel. When you have that ability, but you stand back, this is something that's big. This is what Imam Al-Hassan shows. In fact, the narration says that when they were carrying the body of Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam, Marwan ibn al-Hakam, he came and he held a part of the na'ash of the Imam. And Imam al-Hussein says to him, woe unto you. You're holding the na'ash of Imam al-Hassan and you caused him so much trouble in his life. You were so tough to him. So Marwan says to him, how can I not? When this man had clemency, hilm, yuqas bihi al-jibal, that it can only be measured by mountains, the clemency of Imam al-Hassan salamullah alayhi. Yani the Imam had this ability, but he didn't do it. And this is the main point that I want to get to with the Imam. The sulh is one of them. That the Imam would look at the greater goal. The Imam salamullah alayhi wouldn't rationalize. There was no rationalization that, oh, because this happened, I can do this. Or they're doing that from me, so I can steal this from them. There was none. The goal was to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to save the blood of the Muslims, to be able to allow the religion of Islam to spread. That the people of Sham, as long as they weren't swearing about Imam Ali alayhi salam, this is a victory. And then afterwards, and even though we hear in the narrations that the Abbasides killed more than the Umayyads, during the reign of the Abbasides, the Imams had greater freedom in spreading the religion. Without a doubt, even with the difficulty that they had a greater ability to spread the religion. Why? Because the Abbasides were pretending to be religious and the Abbasides were pretending to be related to the Prophet. This was their authority and legitimacy. Whereas Muawiyah and the Umayyads, they had no legitimacy. They had no relation to the Prophet. To the point that they say one of the sisters of Muawiyah, one of the half-sisters of Muawiyah was married to the Prophet. So Muawiyah would say, I'm the uncle of the believers. That he added some connection, but there's no connection there. But the Abbasides would say, we're the cousins of the Prophet. Because Al-Abbas, Amman Nabi, is our great-grandfather. Do you get it? So this is the way that they would rationalize it. It was different. The Umayyads, they had none of that. But there's 3 moments in the life of the Imam Salamullahi alayhi, of many moments, where the Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam, he showed great clemency. Clemency is hilm. Clemency is forbearance. And clemency is you have the ability to destroy someone, but you hold back and you don't. You have the ability to hurt someone, but you hold back. The Imam is saying that this is perhaps greater reward than al-jihad fi sabilillah. And this is the whole point, my brothers and sisters, that the Imams, we're tested by the Imams and the Imams are tested by us. We are living in the era of Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman Ajlal Farj al-Sharif, who is the Imam, Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa Ali Muhammad. So the Imam Salamullahi alayhi, who is the Imam of our time, who is the awaited Imam. But really, it's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are still waiting for him. It's a blessing from Allah. Because we break rules and we do the wrong thing. But imagine it was the Imam had commanded you to do something and you do the wrong thing. That it's right in front of your eye. Even though Allah has commanded us, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forbearant and merciful with us. Why? Because there's so many mediums before it gets to us. Whereas when the Imam tells you blatantly something and we don't have the ability to respond, or we don't have the ability to accept what the Imam has said or obey what the Imam has said, then we are kuffar from that moment. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us that time, this time that we're living now, to build ourselves up. He's giving us that time for us to be concerned with waking up for prayers, to being concerned with praying on time, giving prayers that proper position, giving us that time for us to abstain from committing sin. So the Imam, salamullahi alayhi, and I've taken way too much of your time, forgive me, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So one of the times when the Imam created or he accepted this peace treaty from Muawiyah and he put the conditions for it. Do you think the Imam couldn't be a strategist like Muawiyah and not care about religion and get the religion in that way? Of course he could have. But the Imams wanted to teach it to us properly. Like Imam al-Baqir said. He said, بَلِيَّةُ النَّاسِ عَلَيْنَا عَظِيمًا. It's a big trial and test. That if we tell them they don't listen, and if we don't tell them they turn away from us, they won't get guidance from other than us. And so the Imam, salamullahi alayhi, he gives this peace treaty. Now people say on that point of jihad fi sabilillah, look for example, the third Khalif Uthman. The third Khalif Uthman was killed in his house. But to this day, do they call him a shaheed? Even the ones that love him. They can't even call him a shaheed. Even though he was killed in his own house. In fact, they don't even know where his grave was. He was just thrown in the back of the Baqi', where they used to throw all the garbage. This is what happened. And you'll see the result of that, inshallah, towards the end. They can't even call him a shaheed. But we have a guy that was a slave of Abu Dhar, who was left behind with Imam Al-Hassan salawatullah alayhi. And his name was John. This slave that was with Abu Abdullah Al-Hassan told Imam Al-Hussein, I'm a slave. And when he was martyred, he's a shaheed. There's no one that can't say he's a shaheed. Killed fi sabilillah. Somebody that we say, bi abi anta wa ummi. Say that it doesn't matter about your status, nor does it matter about what it is that you owned. Uthman, he owned the whole world. He was the Khalif of the Muslimin. On the third king, we shouldn't call them khulafa, we should call them kings. But he was the third king. And he had command over all of that. Even though he was killed in his own house, he's still not known as a shaheed. Full stop. Nor does he, from jurisprudentially, able to have the title of shahada. Why? Shaheed is somebody that spends their life in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, enjoining good and forbidding evil. Uthman was bolstering the Umayyads. The people starved to death. That's why they stormed his house, because they had no food. They came from as far as Egypt. And they killed him in his own house because he was hoarding the wealth. That's what happened to him. And that's why they couldn't say he is a shaheed. But John, the slave of Abu Dhar, is a shaheed. In the same way that Imam Al-Hassan salawatullahi alayhi doesn't have to wield the sword, but he lives his life promoting Islam and killing a massive evil. That if it were not for the treaty of Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam and then breaking the treaty, then Imam Al-Hussein couldn't have taken the stand that he took. Even though Imam Al-Hassan was free from the treaty, Imam Al-Hussein, was outside of the treaty, he still respected the treaty for 10 years after the death of Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam. For 10 years he respected the treaty because that was the work of his brother. In fact, when people would come and ask Imam Al-Hussein something, he would say, what did my master say about Al-Hassan? People would even ask him for money. One man came and said, I want money. He says, how much did my master Al-Hassan give you? I can't give you more than my master. This is Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. To understand the status of Imam Al-Hassan. Anyway, Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam, 3 important points. 1 is the sulh. 2 is then when the accursed Ja'da bint al-Ash'ath poisoned the Imam. That he told her after he knew she had poisoned him, he told her, go back to your family and don't stay with me. He didn't divorce her. In fact, before she killed him, he told his companions, Ja'da will be the one that poisons me. So they said to him, divorce her. He says, even if I divorce her, it has been said to me by Rasulullah, she will be the one that poisons me. So even if I divorce her, she will still poison me. 1. 2, if I divorce her, she'll use that as an excuse. That she'll rationalize it in that way. So the Imam kept her, was good to her. And then he feared for her safety after she poisoned him. And he told her, go back to your family so you can be safe. Just think about that for a second. See how the Imam is just looking for the greater good. Even though he knows she'll be of the companions of hell, he doesn't want her blood to be on the hands of the believers. He doesn't want her blood to be on the hands of Imam Al-Hussein salawatullahi alayhi. Because I'm sure if Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam or Abu al-Fadl Abbas had caught up to her, she would have been killed immediately. But Imam Al-Hassan says to her, I know what you have done. Leave. So he lets her go. The third one is when the Imam Salamullahi alayhi, who has more right than anyone to be buried next to his grandfather, he tells Imam Al-Hussein, I will not accept even a drop of blood and you fighting to have me buried there when they stop me from getting buried there. So the Imam places this in his will. Now what happens is Muawiyah, he contacts Ja'da. This is after the treaty has happened. Imam Al-Hassan moves back to the Medina and lives a quiet life in the Medina. Because these people, as Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says that you have ulcerated my heart. You know, when somebody's just so irritating that they feels like they destroyed your heart. This is what they had done to Imam Ali alayhi salam. They had betrayed Imam Al-Hassan salamullahi alayh. And so Muawiyah saw a chance. He said that I can't live by having Imam Al-Hassan around. Because every time I break a treaty, the people are seeing this, and I can't handle that he has the hearts of the people, and I'm just an authority because I'm over them with a whip. So he tells Ja'da, the daughter of Ash'at, who was the wife of Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam, he says to her that if you kill Al-Hassan, I will let you marry my son Yazid. And I will give you 100,000 dirhams, silver dirhams. So she says, okay. So he purchases some poison from the king of Rome. And Ja'da, this wicked woman, really she's a wicked woman, that she waits for the Imam salamullahi alayhi on a day that he is fasting. And you know what it's like when you are fasting and you were thirsty and you're waiting to drink, you're just waiting for that feeling when you drink for the cool water to go down into your body. Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam drinks that poison and immediately he feels the fire go into his body. And immediately he becomes ill from this poison. Now you see with what she had done, she did not achieve anything. Imam Al-Hassan salamullahi alayhi becomes ill and he falls down in this illness. Imam Al-Hussein, his brother, comes to him to console him and be by his side. They said that the Imam began to vomit parts of his liver out of his mouth, parts of his insides, because they were burning up from the poison and it was falling into a small plate. So he begins to talk to his brother Al-Hussein. He says to him, I want to be buried next to my grandfather. But he says, oh Abu Abdullah, if they do not allow you to bury me next to my grandfather, then do not fight with them. I will refuse for you to have a single drop of blood. As the Imam is sitting there and he begins to get sicker and sicker by the day, one day when he is sitting there, they hear a knock on the door. And when this knock comes on the door, Imam Al-Hussein goes to open it. Imam Al-Hassan says to him, hide the bowl that I have been vomiting my insides into because it's full of blood. And perhaps this is Zainab. I do not want Zainab to see what has fallen out. And so he quickly moves the bowl away. Imam Al-Hussein opens the door and Zainab comes in and she catches sight. She begins to cry and she says, oh brother, that you are going to leave us now. Sayyida Zainab, Imam Al-Hussein says to her, oh Zainab, there is much more that you will see after this. He looks towards his brother Al-Hussein, Al-Hassan, and Imam Al-Hussein begins to cry. Imam Al-Hassan says to Al-Hussein, do not cry, O Hussein, for there is no day like your day, O Abu Abdullah. That on this day, my brother, you are beside me and you are sitting next to me. And there's somebody next to me as I die to sit there and to comfort me in my moment of death. But who will be with you, there for you, O Abu Abdullah, at your moment of death? When Imam Al-Hussein will be surrounded by the enemies, wahidan, faridan, ghariba, nobody around Abu Abdullah Al-Hussein salawatullah alayhi. No one to come and see him and comfort him, except for the spears of the enemy and the rocks of the enemy that would hit down onto the Imam in the same places, the lips of the Imam, the chest of the Imam, where Rasulullah used to kiss the lips and the chest of Abu Abdullah Al-Hussein. When they took Imam Al-Hassan to bury him, as they are taking him towards the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, they reach there to bury him next to his grandfather, and who arrives? The woman arrives on the mule. That woman, she comes out and she says, I refuse to have anybody that I do not love be buried within my house. As soon as she says this, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas hears this. Imam al-Hussein looks over to him. He sees the anger in Abu al-Fadl. He says to him, "Oh, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, save your anger. There's another day for you, oh Abu al-Fadl. There's another day where you will be able to show your anger. There is a day, oh Abu al-Fadl, where Imam al-Hussein will see you with none of these hands that you were going to use to protect Imam al-Hassan. There is a day, oh Abu al-Fadl, when Imam al-Hussein salawatullahi alayhi will be sitting on the sands of Karbala, telling Sayyidah Zainab and listening to her to say, wa daya'atuna ba'daka ya Abu al-Fadl." That she will say, how we are lost without you, O Abu al-Fadl. Then Marwan ibn al-Hakam commands the soldiers that he has to shoot the coffin of Imam al-Hassan with arrows. They shoot this coffin with arrows. Imam al-Hussein says, let us go and bury him next to his grandmother Fatima bint Asad. They take the body of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam and they're taking him past, and it's as if they take him past the grave of Fatima al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha. Imagine Fatima looking at her two beloved sons. One of her sons, she knows he has an appointment with an arrow in his chest. And one of her sons, she knows he has received the appointment of being poisoned. She begins to cry. It is as if from her grave she begins to cry over her two sons. They carry Al-Hassan and they bring him towards Al-Jannatul Baqiyah and they place him in the Baqiyah. You have been to Jannatul Baqiyah. Remember Jannatul Baqiyah? We go there to the Baqiyah, we're not allowed to cry. We stand there, we're not allowed to stand there. We're not allowed to look at the grave of Imam Al-Hassan salawatullahi alayhi. We're not allowed to be around him. And look, today, on this night, when we commemorate this, Al-Baqiyah is dark and it is quiet and there is no one there. And on this night, we see the grave of Abu Abdullah Al-Hussein. This is where the people are. This is where the people have gone to mourn Imam Al-Hassan. This is where the people have gone to mourn Imam Al-Hussein salawatullahi alayhi. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. Ya Allah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of our holy Imam. Inshallah, we will do dua after latum. Please join us in sympathy with Fatima al-Zahra to do some latum over Al-Hasan al-Mushtaba with our beloved brother Mulla Karrar. Welcome with the salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أحسنتم بارك الله. اتهيأ بارك الله بك. ولي على المسموم ولي ولي على المسموم ولي قضى العمر معلوم وليه ما شاء الله ولي على المسموم وليه يا ابن ام العزيز ونظر عيني نويت تروح عني وما تجيني اخوك وما بطل نوح ونيني ويعين الله الاخ الفارق اخيه مقبل للمنية شلون حاله ومغمض العين ودمع ساله وجبته بالطشت كلها قباله شلون بحال زينب هالمسية وراحل كان اللي بالبيت ونسى يا حزام ظهري وانقطع هسه يا ابو محمد شلون الروح تنسى ويا ريت الموت ياخذنا سويه واطوب لي الدار ما هو بن امي بيها مظلمة نوح من شايل وليها، وخطارك يا خويا شحاكيها، وراعي البيت شالي وقطع بي، إمام الحسن والهادي وصابه أسيل المدمع الجرح وصابه، وجعد السمته بسمها وصابه، وتقطع كبده بن حامل حميه، وتقطع كبده بن حامل الحمية. الشاعر رائد الأسد يا غات، أويلاه أويلاه على الحسن نادينا، أويلاه أويلاه عنا غمض عينه. موفقين إن شاء الله لسلامتكم وسلامة زوار الإمام الحسين وزوار الإمام الحسن المجتبى. ارفعوا أصواتكم بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. شوية تفضل لي قدام، بارك الله بكم، موفق إن شاء الله. أويلاه أويلاه عالحسن نادينا، أويلاه أويلاه عنا غمض عينا، أويلاه أويلاه عالحسن نادينا، أويلاه أويلاه عنا غمض عينا، أويلاه أويلاه عالحسن نادينا، أويلاه أويلاه عنا غمضت هذا المسا عيون الكرامة، والإمامة اليوم تبكي على الإمامة، والإمامة اليوم تبكي على الإمام. حسين تجري دمعته وذب العمامة، حسين تجري دمعته وذب العمامة، يقول له من بعدك على الدنيا السلامة، يقول له من بعدك على السلامة. أويلاه أويلاه يبكي يما حسينه، أويلاه أويلاه عنا غم، أويلاه أويلاه عالحسن عالحسن ما شاء الله، عنا غم بعد أويلاه أويلاه عالحسن عنا غم. الأخو لو راح شي صبر خواته، الأخو لو راح شي صبر خواته، شلون بيهن من يذكرن ذكرياته، شلون بيهن من يذكرن ذكرياته، شلون لو مثل الحسن تطلع صفاته، قضى عمره بالترافة كل حياته، قضى عمره بالترافة كل حياته. أويلاه أويلاه باليتم حسينه، أويلاه عنا غماض عنا غم، أويلاه أويلاه هلا هالحسن ما شاء الله، أويلاه أويلاه عنا غم بعد، أويلاه غمض عيونه صدق عن أهل بعيد، وهذا ابو فاضل بكى ويم راسه قاعد، وهذا ابو فاضل بكى يم راسه قاعد. الى الشاعر سعد العبودي غمض عيونه صدق عن اهل بعيد، وهذا ابو فاضل بكى ويم راسه قاعد، هذا ابو فاضل بكى يم راسه قاعد. هو عد امه الزكيه الليله وافد، الموت عد زينب ولا خلاله واحد، الموت عد زينب ولا خلاله واحد. اويلاه اويلاه باسمك نسمينا، اويلاه اويلاه عنا غم، اويلاه ما شاء الله. هلا 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 الحسن كان الكرم عنده علامة، والحسن كان الكرم عنده علامة، تلقى حتى السمه ذاك، تلقى حتى السمه ذاك بابتسامة، تلقى حتى السمه ذاك بابتسامة. حتى نعشه قام يستقبل سهامه، حتى نعشه قام يستقبل سهامه، واليتامى بوقته ما كانهم يتامى، اليتامى بوقته ما كانهم يتامى. وأولاه أولاه حيل لاشتاقي انا، أولاه أولاه عنا غم، أولاه أولاه ضحى بسنينه وحياته للولاية، والحسين هواية خذ منه سجايا، والحسين هواية خذ منه سجايا. بحر ما بيجرف ساعات العطايا، هو من صالح ترى صلحه على غاية، هو من صالح ترى صلحه على غاية. أويلاه أويلاه غير ما حبينا، أويلاه عنا غم، أويلاه أويلاه دمعتي سجابة على حسن ومصابة، دمعتي سجابة على حسن، بعد دمعتي سجابة على حسن. والله مظلوم بحياة حتى باستشهاده، والله مظلوم بحياة حتى باستشهاده. ابن ابو سفيان وجه على حسن احقاده، سمى وتقطع دليله واقترب ميعاده. على حسن يبجون قاموا اخوته واولاده، على حسن يبجون قام اخوته واولاده. تبكي كل احبابه على حسن ومصابه، دمعتي سجابه على حسن، دمعتي سجابه. هلا الله الله بالطشت يقذف كبد قطعه ومسمومه، بالطشت يقذف كبد قطعة ومسمومة يلوج من شدة مصابة وكبدته المعلومة وصل حسين بوصيته وارتحل بهمومه مات مسموم الإمام وفارق أهله وقومه مات مسموم الإمام فارق أهله وقومه النايحات ببابه على حسن ومصابه دمعتي سجابه دمعتي سجابه هلا الله الله هذا الحسين على خير دمعته هماله هذا الحسين على خير دمعته هماله يا خويا ينادي فرقته الشتاله ينظر الحالة عضيده يا عظمها الحاله ميت ومسموم يمه ما حسبها بباله ميت ومسموم يم ما حسبها بباله وانفجع بصوابه على حسن ومصابه دمعتي على حسن هلا دمعتي سجابه الله الله هذا الحسين على خير دمعته هماله حيدر الله هذا الحسين على خير دمعته هماله يا خويا يناد فرقته الشتاله ينظر الحالة عضيده يا عظمها الحاله ميت ومسموم يمه ما حسبها بباله ميت ومسموم يم ما حسبها بباله وانفجع بصوابه على حسن الله الله دمعتي سجابه هلا صابه دمعتي سجابه الله الله والأشد واصعب مصيب زينب المحشومة الشاعر سيد زيد الفحار والأشد واصعب مصيب زينب المحشومة طبت وشافت وليها كبدته ودمومه الحسن واليها واخوها شافت المعصومه ميت وكبده تقطع غيروها رسومه ميت وكبده تقطع غيروها رسومه خايفه ومرتابه على الحسن ومصابه دمعتي دمعتي سجابه الله الله حسين واولاده واخوه نازته شالوها نازته شالوها يم قبر جده محمد رادوا يدفنوها طلعت ام الجمل تصرخ بيتي لا تخلوها جنازة المسموم وصفه بالنبل صابوها جنازة المسموم وصفه بالنبل صابوها والدمع واسبابه على حسن ومصابه دمعتي خادم دمعتي هلا هلا الله الله حسين واولاده واخوه نازته شالوها يم قبر جده محمد رادوا يدفنوها طلعت ام الجمل تصرخ بيتي لا تخلوها جنازة المسموم وصفه بالنبل صابوها جنازة المسموم وصفه بالنبل صابوها والدمع واسبابه على حسن دمعتي سجابه بيت الدعاء دمعتي سجابه الله الله ردوا الأرض البقيع بالبقيع تواره ردوا الأرض البقيع بالبقيع تواره ناحوا عليه بني هاشم والدمع يتجاره والحسن مظلوم والله بمحنته وبداره يا وسف مهدوم قبره هدمه وأسواره يا وسف مهدوم قبره هدمه وأسواره ظل ينوح ترابه على حسن ومصابه دمعتي حسن ومصابه دمعتي سجابه الله الله ردوا الأرض البقيع بالبقيع تواره، ردوا الأرض البقيع بالبقيع تواره، ناحوا علي بني هاشم والدمع يتجاره، والحسن مظلوم والله بمحنته وبداره، يا وسف مهدوم قبره هدموا أسواره، ظل ينوح ترابه على الحسن ومصابه على حسن. اليوم للشيعة طلع ناعيها، مات مسموم الحسن واليها، وويلي على المسموم وويلي وويلي. يا اليوم قلب حسين أصبح من كسر، محني جنه هلال دمعين همر، وكل موالي اليوم يلطم عالصدر، وشيعتك ثوب الحزن غاطيها، وويلي على المسموم بعد وويلي. أصباح الناعي يردد مقتله، وراح يا شيعة ابن عقد الوله، واجروا وي زينب دموع الهامله، تنوح ومصاب الحسن ما ذيها، وويلي على وويلي بعد وويلي. يا نوح يا شيعة وبعد لبسوا السواد، وخلت رفرف بالسم أعلام الحداد، وناحت أملاك السما سبع الشداد، دموعها على ابن النبي تجريها، وويلي على المسموم ويلاه مظلوم الحسن الشاعر راد الأسدي، هو ويلاه مظلوم الحسن، وحيل يا شيعة علي لطموا بشجن، وحتى بالموت ظلم قوة اندفن، جنازة أسهام العيدة ترميها، وويلي على وويلي. بيت الدعاء هذا نعش ابن النبي يا مسلمين، وينرمي بسهام حقد الظالمين، وليش ما يندفن يا مجد الأمين، وبالبقيع جنازته مواريها، وويلي وويلي وويلي. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of our holy Imam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy on our dead, to cure our sick, to fulfill all our needs, inshallah. We will recite the ayah al-Kareem لشفاء المرضى inshallah ولقضاء الحوائج. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. For all of the people that are sick that have asked us, and the people, all of your ill ones, inshallah, may Allah grant them a hasty recovery with this barakat ad-du'a wa barakat ayah al-Kareem inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء يا الله 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 يا حميد بحق محمد ويا عالي بحق علي ويا فاطر بحق فاطمة ويا محسن بحق الحسن ويا قديم الإحسان بحق الحسين اشف كل المرضى يا الله وأقضي حوائجنا جميعا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا يا الله اللهم ارزقنا زيارة أبا عبد الله الحسين وزيارة بحق محمد وآل محمد وزيارة الإمام المجتبى صلوات الله عليه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم كن لوليك صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وعلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات والشهداء والباذلين في هذا المكان ولأماتكم جميعا ومن ليس له ذاكر ولشفاء المرضى وقضاء الحوائج رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة وأداها إليهم مع الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد